Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is October 14th, 2020, 5:30. I call this meeting to order. You'll all rise for a moment of silence. Thank you. If you'll join me for a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mayor Tappan.
Here.
Vice Mayor Kojin.
Here.
Councilor Davis.
Here.
Councilor Yank.
Here.
Councilor Lee.
Here.
Councilor Augie.
Here.
Councilor Warner.
Here. Priority list. Is there any discussion pertaining to City Council's strategic priorities? Any discussion pertaining to councilors' individual priorities? We'll move on to the minutes.
Move to the minutes. Second.
In a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. The consent agenda. The consent portion of the agenda is a means to expedite routine matters that must be acted on by council. All items approved will be done in one undebatable motion, passed unanimously.
Move to approve the consent portion of the agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We have no public hearings. Hearing from the citizens, members of the public may address council on any items that are not listed on the agenda. Just a reminder that council cannot respond to the call to the public. Anyone out in the public there? All right, moving on to reports. So I think you should have all seen this in your email, but I wanted to bring it up on the agenda so it becomes in the newspaper again. The Executive Board of the Arizona Association of Chiefs of Police met to consider a recommendation of the Arizona Law Enforcement Accreditation Commission to award the Page Police Department, and they voted unanimously to accept the recommendation. This makes the Page Police Department only one in 8 municipal law enforcement agencies to become accredited by the ALEAP program. So I just wanted to thank the chief for all his hard work and let you know the city of Page stands up for our police.
Thank you for the recognition. Mr. Mayor, can we have the chief explain some of what the process was?
Certainly.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Yank, Mayor. This is an arduous process. This is something that took over 2 years to accomplish. There are 173 standards that cover everything within the police department, from our handling of evidence to our policies. As you remember, the first of the year, you allowed us to change policies and procedures, so we went through a whole policy change right in the middle of this. But it was by a way that would help us accomplish this. They evaluate our use of force, how our officers behave with the public. They came on site here and actually rode with our officers and dug right into our department and checked out how our records, how our dispatch, every aspect of the department is analyzed and scrutinized. So based upon the process we had to go through, we are very, very proud of what we've done, and it just shows how well that our staff are operating. But I'd also like to point out that this does not mean we've arrived. This is a benchmark. We've met the standard. Our goal in 4 years is to exceed the standard we've met this time.
Thank you, Chief. City Manager, do you have any?
Just a couple of things. Bringing you up to date, another pat on the back actually for Tim and his crew. Brett Slavens actually has passed his test to become certified building inspector. So he's been studying for that for a couple years as well. So we now have on board
Certified building official.
certified building official, which is even better, I guess.
Sounds more official.
Sounds more official. So kudos to him. That was something that he's really been working on and something that we can respect on that matter. Couple of tidbits to bring up to you with our first quarter ending. I don't know if how deep you went into some of the information that Linda has set out, but through September 30th, through the first quarter, so far we've received 21.7% of the 25% sales tax that we expected. So that's a little concerning, being 3 points down on the first quarter. So, if you consider that going, that's 10% less than we expected, even cutting the budget we did. A little kudos, though. As you know, we've put some pretty tight restrictions on department heads, and they've spent only 15% of the 25% that we allotted them. So we're still ahead of the game. We're keeping close eye on it, but just to let you know, we may have to keep tightening the belt more than we even expected, and we were hoping that was going to be just the opposite. So
What month is that ending?
that would have been ending September 30th. So it was our
Those are
first
the best
quarter.
3 months of the year.
Yep, that's our concern. So, but we'll keep an eye on it. And other than that, I think that's about all I have.
Thank you. Boards and commissions, any reports on the boards and commissions?
I got one from PUE that we had our meeting last night, and the only scary thing that came out of it was that when we purchased power beyond what we can get from our CRISP or other contracts on the open market, we paid 3 times what we've been paying for it per kilowatt hour, and which is double what we budgeted for. And so that dropped back down again just recently, but that's kind of something we're going to have to worry about in the future as the market gets scary and they close down more power plants. So it wasn't a good thing.
Oh, that's not a good thing. I thought we were selling some, aren't we?
Yeah, but not enough to mount anything.
Oh, really?
$300,000 worth of. When the generators fire up, we sell some back to the market, but by the time you do the strike rate and all that stuff, it's not a money maker. And you can't afford to run them because of the cost of diesel. But
Wow.
that's it.
Thank you. The Substance Abuse Task Force met last week. There's some really good people on that, and they all did introductions and just kind of a first meeting, get to know everyone. So I'm really excited about that task force. So thank you for getting that together.
You bet. Next week's the first one, so.
We have no unfinished business. We're going to move on to new business. And the Government Financial Officers Association has again awarded a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence to the Financial Department for 2019. Page has received that for the last 20 years, and the last 10 have been under the director of Linda Watson. So I want to thank you for all your help on that. Yeah, fancy folder for you.
Put it on the wall.
Get some longer walls. Just patient.
I'll get you a little bit more. Good job, Linda.
Thank you very much, Linda.
Okay, 13.2, discussion and possible action pertaining to conditional use permit for watchman quarters in the Service Commercial Zoning District, CUP 20-004.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Tim Swan, Community Development. So this is an application that's coming in for a steel storage building with the applicant requesting a conditional use permit to be able to put in a night watchman's quarters for the purpose of safety and security over the building. This is a standard conditional use permit. You see the staff report and the recommended conditions. There's additional items of consideration that's included in the staff report, including limiting occupancy, but that hasn't been the standard practice here. So you have the recommendation by staff with the recommended conditions.
And it was approved by the planning and zoning.
I move to approve conditional use permit CUP 20-004 subject to conditions 1 through 12 in the staff report and with additional condition that there be a maximum of 2 overnight occupants permitted in the watchman's quarters.
Second.
Motion and second. So, so we have other watchman quarters in the city, so we're setting a precedence on this one
No, I don't think we're
By-
setting a precedent.
by limiting the occupancy.
Oh, by the limitation of 2? Well, looking at the building plan, it doesn't look like a multifamily facility, so I don't think I would, I think the condition is appropriate unless staff feels otherwise. I mean, do you think that it's a family unit?
Mr. Mayor, council member, no, I don't believe it's a family unit. If there was a limitation that has been discussed of 2, been discussed with the applicant, and 2 is fine with them.
I think it falls within the use of night's watchman quarters. It's not meant to be a family home with kids and playgrounds. It's meant to be an apartment where you have a watchman. Well, that's at least what we have in the community now.
Right.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Councilor Davis, vote. Didn't hear anything. Motion passes unanimously. 13.3, discussion of possible action pertaining to major subdivision of city-owned land, sub 20-101.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Tim Swan, Community Development. So this is a subdivision of a project that we've had on our table for quite some time. This is the Boulder Ranch project. They've received their entitlements. They're going through their site plan process as well as subdivision process. In a nutshell, the city owns a large parcel of land, hundreds of acres. This project is looking to carve out the area which they are under contract with of city land so they can build, develop, and finalize their purchase and it be an independent piece here. This has gone through the review process and you can see the giant parcel there. And it will be a portion thereof of that parcel. It's been through engineering. There's the actual preliminary plot there. And you have staff recommendation in front of you as well.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to recuse myself on this item.
So noted.
I move to approve sub 20-1 conditions upon compliance with the recommendations noted in the September 30th, 2020 letter from Iron Rock Engineering and the September 29th, 2020 letter from the Department of Energy Western Area Power Administration.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Can you give us just a quick on the WAPA?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Councilman. So WAPA is working with us in a very intimate level with many of our projects from start to finish nowadays, which wasn't in the past. So catching early on, WAPA has a number of access easements to their power lines. So it's not only their power line access easement, which is hundreds of 100 feet, 150 feet or so, but is also the path of travel to get to that access. There is a recorded access that encompasses the subject property, and the comment is essentially to address and resolve that access easement on the new plat. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, so there won't be any problem?
Nope,
With
no,
that?
WAPA's involved and workable. So,
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed with those members present.
Except.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, she's there. I just heard her.
Early. Yes, please.
Thirteen point four, discussion and possible action pertaining to restricting on-street parking along certain areas of Aqua Avenue. Resolution number 1255-20. Madam Clerk, please introduce.
Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you.
I like your excitement.
Very enthusiastic.
A resolution of the mayor and city council of the city of Page, Coconino County, Arizona, restricting parking along a portion of Aqua Avenue.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. We seek approval of this resolution to restrict the parking on certain areas of Aqua Avenue in order to preserve public safety. This issue came before us arising from complaints to the Code Compliance Division regarding on-street parking that was obstructing visibility and safe access to local businesses. We collaborated with the police department to address the complaints, and in doing so, we gained an understanding that that particular street has posed public safety issues for a while based on the local traffic and speeding, and the visibility impairment has only increased the risk. We did have a meeting with key staff from our department along with police, fire, and public works, where we discussed additional issues such as protection of the water treatment plant, obstruction of fire department access, and that no remedy is available under the current city code to restrict the parking. Staff does agree that the best course of action to solve these problems is to restrict the parking along the high-risk areas as shown here. Chief Sanders has formally endorsed this remedy, and staff does recommend adoption of Resolution 1255-20.
Is there are we working on something to remedy the speeding on that corner?
Well, this will help with part of that, but we address speeding as much as we can. But speeding per se is part of the problem, and that's honestly throughout the city. But with the parking problem that exists here, it just aggravates it.
Okay. Any questions?
Has there been communication with any of the businesses that border the opposite side of the street?
There has. It's kind of how the code compliance case arose. There was one business that was unhappy about another business, and that's what brought this all to a head.
So speed bump or anything like that in there to help with the speeding? Because that's a real cool curve there, you know.
Yeah, I think there are some things we could do there. We didn't really explore that piece at all. But if you'll notice on here that we're only asking to restrict parking on the water treatment side so that we don't interfere with the businesses.
Right.
That was a concern. With the speeding side, I think there's some lines we could probably paint on there or other tactics we could use. Oftentimes speed bumps, although they seem good, they turn problematic over time, especially in this area where we're driving big trucks over them.
Yeah, okay.
I move to adopt resolution number 1255-20 to prohibit on-street parking along certain areas of Aqua Avenue.
Second.
Motion and second. Further comments, Councilwoman?
I understand that you said that you didn't address it along the business frontage, but that's where the majority of the traffic comes in and out of. And with the trucks and other things that are parked along that frontage, you're not reducing that hazard with this.
Correct.
You're absolutely right, and that is problematic. What's happened along there is there's actually not really a lot of actual on-street parking. There's off-street parking right there, but they actually more or less take up the sidewalk and their driveway there. The issue here with the U-Haul company that's there, they've got to find a way to park off the street, and they do have space behind those buildings where they could do that, and it's actually part of their business there. So no, we did not address it in front of the businesses, but the concern was that if we don't, if we just redline everything without giving some thought to their ability to have customers park and everything else, it was felt that we better try to limit it to what was the low-hanging fruit, as it were. It would address the problem best, we felt.
And the U-Haul's parking in the front, not necessarily on the street, but blocking the sidewalk. Has that been addressed?
That is addressed when that happens by a citation, but where they're normally parking is across the street here on the water treatment side, or on the water tower side.
And for drop-off and pickup?
Just for parking, for storage.
Even to the point of blocking the fire hydrant area.
However, if, council member, mayor, if you have some additional concerns, perhaps we should table and discuss that to make sure that we address.
I feel that redlining the curb on the frontage of a business is a little bit of an overreach. I think that we should attempt to mitigate the problem by this measure, and if there's further action required down the road, at least we've taken a step and we can move in that direction. But I think to redline a curb directly in front of a business is a little bit of an overreach, personally. But in that regard, if they're storing U-Haul equipment overnight on that street, isn't that a violation of our code?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor, that's a good point. Chapter 72 does address the 24-hour limit for vehicles and the 72-hour limit for trailers. However, that's not a remedy against habitual offenders who will just circle the block and park in the same spot just to restart the clock. And that is an issue that we face in code compliance and police department faces.
Literally, they can get in and move a foot forward, and now the clock starts all over again.
Okay, you work on that clock and we'll move on.
All right, we got a motion on the table. I'll call for the question. All in favor of adopting resolution 1255-20, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
For Chris this time. Holding clear.
13.5, discussion and possible action pertaining to regulation of marijuana establishments, ordinance number 677-20. Clerk, please introduce.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Page, Arizona, amending the Page City Code of Ordinances by adopting a new Chapter 95 relating to the regulations of recreational marijuana, prohibiting marijuana on public property, prohibiting marijuana establishments and marijuana testing facilities, establishing regulations for personal use at an individual's primary residence, authorizing retail sale tax from marijuana and marijuana products, and providing for enforcement and penalties.
I'm going to turn this over to our...
What's that?
I'm going to turn this over to our city attorney.
So this is
on the, one of the things that we're voting for, again, is the Smart and Safe Arizona Act throughout Arizona. And it's a long act, but primarily what it does is it makes, it legalizes recreational marijuana. And one of the things that comes with that, obviously, is the facilities to sell it. The Arizona League of Cities had a task force that they put together to make some recommendations, and this is by and large the ordinance that they prepared in the event that a city wants to prohibit the testing facilities and the retail establishments. So, and the reason to start talking about this now is that there's a concern from a zoning perspective that if this passes and we don't have a prohibition on the books, that there could be a right to establish one of these facilities, particularly anywhere that a medical dispensary would be allowed. And then at that point, if we take away that right once it's vested, we've created a problem for ourselves wherein we could be responsible for any diminution in value if we prohibit it later. So the idea is to start a discussion about how council wants to approach this issue. And if you have interest in prohibiting the facilities, my recommendation is that you do that prior to the election on November 4th. There's a couple of different things to consider, and really the basis for that too is to, you know, see if it passes, and then you can kind of buy yourself a little bit of time to figure out how you want to regulate them later on. To go through the zoning process right now and try to get the zoning in place before the measure passes is not feasible at this point. It's because of the public hearings and the process that you have to go through. So if you want to prohibit, you really need to do it before. If you don't want to prohibit, then there's no real need to take any action at this point. What the original ordinance that I submitted is prohibits both testing facilities and retail establishments. Upon closer examination of the proposed act, there's some contradictory provisions within the act itself, which I think were probably intentional. If you look at the one sheet that I gave you, this is a copy of one section, and I've highlighted a couple of areas there about what a locality may do. And under A3 it says that a locality may prohibit marijuana establishments or marijuana testing facilities or both. That's what the draft ordinance that you have in the agenda pack does. If you go down to subsection C of that same part of the statute, it says a locality may not enact any ordinance, regulation, or rule that, if you go down to 5, restricts or interferes with the ability of a dual licensee or an entity eligible to become a dual licensee to operate a nonprofit medical marijuana dispensary and a marijuana establishment cooperative at shared locations. So what that says is that we cannot restrict a dispensary from also being a retail establishment. And that's where the contradiction is. Up above it says we can restrict retail establishment, we can prohibit retail establishments, and then if you go down to C5 it says we cannot restrict a dispensary from operating a retail establishment. So the alternate ordinance that I passed out just on paper beforehand, the only thing, it's all the same except for the section 95.04 of the ordinance, which is on page 7 of the exhibit. Instead of prohibiting both testing establishment or a testing facility and a retail establishment, it prohibits testing facility and allows for a dual licensee to operate. And so that would allow any dispensary to apply for dual license and then operate a retail establishment in connection with their dispensary. So that would be another option if there's concern that, well, the statute contradicts itself and maybe we can't really prohibit a retail facility. That would be another option. I realize this is a lot of information and it's kind of dropped on you. Part of the point of bringing it here tonight is to have a discussion and maybe to start thinking about this. It's not necessary to vote on this tonight, but I wanted to bring it tonight to give you a couple more weeks. If you wanted to prohibit something, that you could do it at the next meeting. So with that, I can maybe answer your questions.
I actually have a question for Tim. What does our current zoning say?
Mr. Chair, Councilwoman, I could pull it up here, but I don't want to misspeak. But there are prohibitions. Obviously, we are regulating the medical facilities that way too. If you want sort of the thought here, if the law does pass, we don't, we're not taking in consideration recreational uses, period, whatsoever. We are considering medical uses. And whatever the will of the council is, I would suggest that that's what we want to work towards. Our city attorney brings up the point that in terms of the statute that we have to adopt a zoning ordinance that we all would like, we don't have the time to do that. But if we do prohibit, it does buy us time to begin workshops to prepare. And I'm sure our council here is on board and wanting to be hands-on to really make sure we do it.
And Tim, to clarify, let me know if I'm wrong.
Sure.
Councilor, there's only one place currently that is zoned for medical marijuana.
Yes.
So no place else in town, if I'm correct, Tim, could currently meet the standards.
And there is restrictions from certain feet away from areas such as additional distribution centers, as well as school facilities and so on and so forth.
Right. So even if we, excuse me, didn't prohibit this, if it was something that, said, hey, we really want to look into, we would still have to really look at rewriting the zoning anyway.
Which we are already in the process of doing in terms of a general plan and zoning amendment.
Does it discuss that though, Tim?
The zoning ordinance, we would incorporate it in this revision. It's a major topic.
Does it specifically say medical or just?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Currently it does.
We have current regulations that apply to medical dispensaries that sets the boundaries as to where they can be. There's footage restrictions on how far you have to be away from churches and schools, and the types of signage that you can have. Any property, we only have one that's, to my knowledge, that's ever been operated in Page, and I don't know that it's operating now. Having said that, any property that meets the requirements of our code and is appropriately zoned has a right to, if they jump through all the hoops and get their licenses, to operate a dispensary on that piece of property. So the concern is that for all of those properties that are allowed to be a medical dispensary right now, and I have no idea how many parcels would meet the requirements, if this law passes, as soon as it becomes effective, they have a right at that point to become a dual licensee and operate a retail establishment, or a property right to do that if they meet all the conditions of getting the licenses and everything. If we don't have the prohibition in place prior to that becoming effective, the act becoming effective, then we can't really walk it back at that point, if that makes sense. All of those properties would have that vested right.
That does make sense.
So I guess probably the thing is it boils down to, do we want to allow a retail establishment or not allow a retail establishment, right?
That's really the question. I mean, it's really a policy question, and we can work out the details later of the ordinance, but...
Or kicking it down the road a little.
Yeah.
For a little more planning rather than in the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, but I mean, we just don't do anything tonight or whatever, and and see what comes out of the election. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you know, I'm in favor of allowing a retail strictly because of the fact I'd like the sales tax revenue, but also people are going to purchase it, I believe, in Flagstaff or Mesquite or Colorado or California. I mean, California's going to handling marijuana like a wine country thing, where you have, you know, your Terrier, I think, as far as the grapes, the vines are grown in a certain type of soil conditions, and so they can rate the marijuana that's grown on those grounds and be able to charge more for that particular marijuana and stuff like that. So,
I've got another view of that. I think we failed in our zoning in allowing the medical dispensary, not necessarily in allowing it, but in the manner in which it was developed. Okay, it looks like a tagged sea container on Long Beach Harbor.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of the ugliest pieces of property we have, and it's in the gateway of our community. Now, if we're going to entertain something like this, we need to stop, go back, and look at how do we allow them to build. A medical dispensary, I had this debate or discussion with the owner of the facility one night, and I said, you proclaim to be a medical dispensary and you look like a head shop. You should look like Encompass or a medical facility, right? You should clean your act up. So if we're going to go down this road, I think we need to revisit how we allow them to build and what they look like after they're finished, okay? The other thing I'd like to look at is, since we have a permitted use that's not operative, and it's not been operative for at least 3 to 5 years, what's the statute of limitations that we can go back and retract that and take a second look at how we're going to let them build it if they come back? You know, when can we, since we have no operative business right now in the medical marijuana dispensaries, can we revoke that permit and go back and take a second look at how we would rewrite the book if we were going to start over?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, that's a good point. So for the record here, medical dispensaries are allowed in the service commercial area with a conditional use permit. There's some case law. We have a wonderful, intelligent, charismatic city attorney here that can, he's not up for review, right?
Signed your check.
So they can take a look at some case law. With the conditional use permit, the city has some ability to be able to take away entitlement, I guess, rights there. So when we allow things, you have use by right or abilities that way too. So I think it is a good opportunity to be able to, you know, really, like you said, take a step back. And
Well, that was a CUP. So
If we're going
there's not that
to
anymore, so that makes
go
that
based on
CUP.
what things look like, wouldn't we have to do that across the board? I mean, we have like a chicken place, an old Sonic, we have a gas station barbecue place, we have gas station tour groups. So if we're going to restrict what things look like, I think it should be across the board and not just one area.
Well, not only that, but you know, if we revisit the zoning, and that's why I was asking about the zoning. If we revisit the zoning, I'm not talking, you know, industrial style. I've been talking to several people in the community. They go out to dispensaries in other areas, and they're in shopping malls, little strip malls, you know. So if we revisit the zoning and allow, you know, a retail store, a dispensary, to be in, you know, I don't think this is allowed, Josh, in the proposed proposition, but I'm just using this as an example. Excuse me. Over in Block 17, you know, if we let somebody open one in there, then they have to conform with the rest for the frontal facade and whatnot. You know, so I mean, it's the look can be addressed. I mean, ultimately it can be just through the zoning. And I'm not, you know, I'm not for doing a prohibition on anything. I'm for, since Tim's department is already looking at the zoning, let's throw this one into the mix as well.
Well, personally, I think that as far as an overview of zoning that applies to every business in town, we have a new set of codes that apply to development standards. They didn't exist on the day that dispensary was built. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but they had a lot of leeway and were given privilege to do things that would not be even considered. You know, they took basically a couple sea containers and threw them down there and convinced our planning board that it was okay and would look great if we just allowed them to put a mosaic up there. Well, you know, I mean that you get what you've got, okay? But I don't want to set the city up in a trap that an election comes on in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and all of a sudden our hands are tied and we're forced. I think we need to take the strongest prohibition now and then phase in what we want that to look like in a legal standard. If we don't take action, the state will take it for us, okay? So I'm saying we need to follow the advice of staff and put the strongest level of prohibition on these uses and then walk slowly on how we want to implement that. If you want them to shop at mall, that's your decision down the road. But we should not have the state tell us we have to allow them in a shopping mall if the majority of the citizens don't want them there. So let's take action now and get ahead of the curve. That's what the attorney's putting in front of you right now, is giving you options. He's buying time. You sit back and wait, and the state's going to buy your time for you. So that's that in a nutshell, right?
Yeah, if we don't act, then we lose the ability in some extent to control the destiny of this. There will still be, you know, it won't be totally wide open because we can do some things later on. It looks like in our code, if I can tell correctly, it's a conditional use permit in right now for a dispensary in the service commercial, and there might be other places that it might be in the industrial park that it's allowed, but
It's not.
it's not allowed in the industrial.
Service commercial, and there's restrictions of 200 feet from any additional dispensaries as well as adult entertainment. You have 1,200 feet from the boundaries of residential district schools and so on and so forth here. So.
But Tim, back to the...
I don't see a problem with those restrictions as it is. Like, if it's okay for the entire state to do, why do we have to put restrictions on top of that when people are just going to go elsewhere for it if we don't have it here?
Back to the conditional use that's in place now. Conditional use means it's conditioned. If it's not being used, isn't that a renewable, isn't that annually renewable?
If they fall, if they're not compliant, then it is, a lot of times it's revoked. We'd have to take a look at the one that they hold specifically to this, but that's typically what it is. If they're not in compliance, it is revoked.
So as a result of this, I mean, I would like to advocate that we direct staff to look into that particular conditional use permit, find out what the provisions are, and bring back some options on how we can at least improve on what we have, or revoke it altogether and have them start over.
We can look into that.
So if we go ahead and follow through with what your recommendation is tonight, so let's say December, someone walks up and says, I want to open up a retail marijuana establishment next to the vape shop and by Axis Mall there. What would we have to do? Is it totally out of the question, or we would go through the zoning, or is it?
It would be prohibited if you were to adopt an ordinance that says that you can't have a testing facility or retail establishment in Page, then it would not be an option for them to do that.
Right. So on down the road, retail would be out.
Yeah, unless we were to change that. I mean, but yeah, initially it would be just blanket prohibited. The other option, the alternate option, is to allow for a retail establishment only when it's operated as part of a medical dispensary as well. So that's the alternate, the one that's not quite as prohibitive, but is still pretty restrictive.
So we're going through all of this stuff to make it easier for companies to come here and housing developments and stuff, and then you want to go backwards for marijuana facilities and make it harder for them to come here.
I don't know that I'm advocating for that. I'm not taking a position on the policy of what the council should do. I'm simply saying that if council wants to prohibit these facilities, you need to act. I recommend and advise that you act within the next 3 weeks to do that. If you don't want to prohibit these facilities, then you don't need to do anything on that. So
I'd rather not prohibit them.
That's okay. I just want to be clear. I'm not advocating a position. I'm just letting you know that you have a time window to act here, and if you don't act in that time period, then the decision is going to be made for you.
So it's not your recommendation that we should prohibit it.
I'm going to want to step one more. It's not, that's a little misleading. It's not necessarily do you want to prohibit, it's do you want to set any kind of conditions. If we don't do anything and this election passes and that becomes law, whatever the law says, we take, okay? So, yeah, the ordinance is written to prohibit, okay? But also it gives the council, the next council, the opportunity to revise the ordinance in a manner that fits the restrictions that you want to set upon that use. Otherwise, the restrictions are what the law states.
And the state law won't address any zoning in particular. So what will happen if it passes is I don't believe that the Department of Health is going to start processing any applications until January, and like mid to late January. So if it were to pass and someone were to come in and say, I want to have a retail establishment, then most likely what we would do is we would have to act, because technically it wouldn't be allowed under our zoning at that point, because we don't permit it. And so if it's not specifically permitted in our zoning, then it's not permitted. So what we would need to do at that point is quickly come up with what our rules are, and realistically what we would look at, and given the constraints of the law, is it would probably just mirror our dispensary and say, okay, you know, we can't be more restrictive than what our dispensary regulations are, so we would probably just mirror that for the zoning and get that in place. And by the time that DHS is issuing licenses for that, then, you know, we would have a process.
The conditional use permit, or the law that was passed that allowed dispensaries, gave municipalities the right to pick and choose where they thought that were locations were appropriate, regardless of commonality on the zoning district. So what that means is that anyone in a service commercial zone without this ordinance could apply, and you would have no right to refuse them. However, the current conditional use, from my understanding, the current law allows a municipality to say, well, you know, you have service commercial down on North Navajo Drive, but we don't think that's an appropriate place for a marijuana dispensary. So we'll put you out on Hall Road. Okay, and that's okay. Without doing this, you do not have that right to pick and choose where you want them to be.
Well, that's a good question, because what we would have to act and put in some regulations, and we would have to do it in a somewhat hurried fashion, because once it's legal, if we don't allow for it, then we've got a problem.
if our zoning regulations do not allow them to put a marijuana retail shop anywhere, and the law says that they can do it, well, now we're in conflict with state law. And so the way that this will play out from a practical standpoint is if we don't prohibit it and it passes in November, we're going to be bringing zoning regulations and starting that process of implementing those zoning regulations. So by the time DHS is issuing licenses, we'll have something in place. The concern with that is we're going into the holidays and we've got to go through the zoning processes basically through December, hold our public hearings and do everything else. And we're going to be on a time crunch where we may not be able to necessarily be really thoughtful about and weigh all of the alternatives of our decision in the zoning. But staff is going to move forward and have proposed zoning regulations to you that would be effective in January, so that when these licenses are issued, we have rules to allow them so that we're not in conflict with state law. They might not be the best rules given the time constraints.
And you have to remember that it's a democratic form of government, so even if you were to say we're going to restrict everything, you can change that in 4 weeks and say we're going to allow this, this, and this. Raise your hand, and it changes. So no matter what you do in your form of government, you're lucky enough that your hands can't be held by what this dais does in a month.
Yeah, then that's...
I understand that, but like, for instance, the whole Horseshoe Bend thing. You basically, at the last council meeting, said, we're making everybody pay for Horseshoe Bend. Let's close this, let's drop this now. And that's what Cogent said. So that is basically like, this is our final decision, that's it. So basically what I think is going to happen if we restrict the facilities to the point where we don't want them allowed like everywhere, that's never going to change.
Yeah, it is. As soon as you get 4 council people that want to do something different, it's going to change. That's all it takes.
For gray hair guys like us. I think that this gives council options.
I'm looking for a motion.
I don't think our council
You
actually
introduced the motion.
represents the majority of
Yes,
patrons.
it's been
I
introduced.
move to adopt ordinance 667-20.
With the prohibition or with the dual license provision? The alternate or the original, I guess is.
I'm a little foggy on the way you propose that. What I'm in favor of is to provide this future council with the most options they have available to build something that fits the community in a timely fashion before the law becomes.
So that would be the outright prohibition for now, and then work on the rules later.
Okay, well then that would be my favorite.
And you can give us direction to do that.
So the one in the packet.
Yes.
Okay, I'll second it, see where it flies.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 I think we have to do a tally here.
Council Warner,
Aye.
Council Captain, excuse me, Mayor Captain,
Nay.
Vice Mayor Coaching,
Aye.
Council Davis,
No.
Council Lee,
Nay.
Council Yank,
Aye.
Council Hoffman.
No. Motion fails to pass. Moving on. (15.1) Departments, discussion and possible action pertaining to purchase of 7 tough books for Page Police Department patrol vehicles.
Evening, Mayor, Council. Come to you this evening to purchase 7 tough books for the new patrol vehicles. We found that with the new technology we put in there, using the tough book gives a bigger screen, just makes it a little bit easier. The tough pads that we do have left over will be going to the fire department because they've been needing some consoles in there. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Questions?
Yeah, I went online and looked at Tough Books. There's a million of those suckers out there. So what makes these at $2,500 a pop better than the ones that are $1,000 a pop or whatever?
So it's all about how well they work in heat and sitting in those vehicles on all the time. So I mean, if you drop them, if you take your laptop right now and drop it on the ground, it's going to break. If you take one of these and drop it on the ground, or if you let it sit there in the heat on in the middle of the day, your laptop's not going to last. These will.
Okay.
Move to approve the purchase of 7 Tough Books for the police department in the amount of $17,710.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
With the condition that the police department's got to stop spending this much money next time.
And the chief has to present it instead of throwing this guy under the bus.
There you go.
Well, it's computers and
IT.
programs, and that all is under IT, although we should get the chief to...
All I can tell you is, do they work or not work? Yeah.
Where's the
It's a budgeted item?
Yeah, it is.
Out of King.
Out of my budget. Yes, it is.
It's as long as it's a budgeted item and we've got the funds for it.
Well, we don't have the funds for it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that.
This doesn't have any
Can we use,
interaction with the CARES Act at all. No way to
Can we use CARES money?
No.
wiggle that in.
Boy, I would have to defer to our city manager. I really don't know the parameters.
Tried and tried, and there's just, this one's not going to flow. For the airport. Yeah, for the airport.
We do go to the airport.
Yeah, you go to the airport all the time.
Call for the question.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, guys.
Motion passes unanimously. Left on the agenda are 2 executive sessions. Executive session pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A1, City Magistrate, and Executive Session 2 pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A1, Page City Manager Karen Coldwell evaluation.
Move to go into executive sessions consecutively.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We adjourn to executive session.
Need to sign a new one. If you're doing anything that changes, then you do just a motion.
Live. We are on? Oh, there's what I was looking for. All right, we're back from executive session. 16.1, City Magistrate.
I move we approve the contract and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Motion in multiple seconds. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
You can, yeah. What? Might not be bad. You can just announce it. Doesn't have to be part of the motion, but you can announce who the contract is with. Andrew Hettinger.
City Council has hired Andrew Hettinger for our new magistrate court. 16.2.
Move to renew the city manager's contract with an increase in salary as discussed, or do we need to put that in?
No, you don't have to have the number in the motion.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. That is the end of regular business. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.